Have you ever wondered, what if the biggest mistake you could make in your emotional life is not who you choose to love, but the moment you quietly decide that you need someone else to feel complete? What if the real danger isn't rejection, isn't heartbreak, isn't even being alone, but slowly giving another person the power to regulate your peace? What if, without realizing it, you hand over your emotional stability, not to love, but to fear of silence? Today's video is called, Never Get a Girlfriend After 60. Learned this at 77 and why you should too. And no, this is not a message against women. It is not a message against relationships. It is a message about something far deeper, emotional sovereignty. Because there is a point in a man's life when love should no longer be used to fill space, but only to share a life that is already whole. There is a moment when companionship stops being growth and quietly becomes emotional insurance, and most men never notice the difference. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button and watch this entire video until the end, because what you are about to hear is not dating advice. It is a psychological survival lesson for the second half of your life. A lesson about peace, a lesson about identity, a lesson about what really becomes fragile as you grow older, and a lesson I only understood after listening to a man who learned it at 77. Let me start with a story, not a dramatic one, not a cinematic one, a quiet one. At 77 years old, a man once said something to me that stayed in my mind longer than any motivational quote I had ever heard. He didn't say, women are bad. He didn't say, love is useless. He didn't say, relationships are a waste. He simply said, if I could go back, I would not build my peace around another person after 60. That sentence hit deeper than it should have, because most men believe something very different. They believe companionship is the cure for loneliness. They believe romance is the cure for emptiness. They believe having someone beside you automatically gives your life meaning. But real life does not reward good intentions. It rewards emotional structure. And this is where the lesson begins. Why this is not an anti-love message. Let me be very clear before you misunderstand me. This is not a video about hating women. This is not a video about rejecting intimacy. This is not a video about becoming emotionally distant or closed off. And it is definitely not a call to live a lonely, bitter life. This is a video about timing. It is about psychology. It is about emotional dependency. And above all, it is about self-governance, because love has seasons, and what nourishes a man at 30 can quietly weaken him at 60. Not because love becomes bad, but because the function love plays in your life must change. At 30, relationships help shape you. They stretch you. They challenge your identity. They expose your emotional blind spots. They teach you how to regulate desire, disappointment, conflict, and attachment. At 60, your life is no longer meant to be shaped. It is meant to be stabilized. You are no longer experimenting with who you are. You are protecting who you have already become. That difference is everything. Stoicism teaches something uncomfortable. Different stages of life require different emotional strategies. The emotional risk that builds strength in youth can quietly drain clarity in later life. The mistake men make is using young man psychology in an old man life. Young man psychology seeks intensity. It seeks validation. It seeks emotional movement, novelty, and excitement. But later in life, the real currency is not excitement. It is inner order. It is mental quiet. It is emotional simplicity. And when a man continues to approach love as stimulation instead of alignment, he slowly replaces stability with emotional noise. So no, this is not about pushing love away. It is about refusing to use love as emotional medicine. Because love should never be a remedy for loneliness, boredom, or fear of aging. It should only be a companion to a life that is already emotionally complete. The dangerous myth of late-life romance. The world tells you a comforting story. You're never too old for love. You deserve companionship. You should not grow old alone. It sounds compassionate, but psychology is not built on slogans. It is built on patterns, and one pattern is extremely consistent. When men seek romantic attachment later in life to fill emotional or existential gaps, they often lose the very stability they spent decades building, not because the woman is harmful, but because the emotional structure of the man has changed. At 60, you are no longer constructing your identity. You are protecting it. That difference changes everything. What changes in a man after 60? At a younger age, relationships are part of development. You learn boundaries. You learn emotional communication. You learn self-control. You learn how to handle attraction, rejection, uncertainty, and desire without losing yourself. In your earlier years, emotional friction is not only normal, it is useful. It sharpens you. It teaches you resilience. It forces you to grow psychological muscles you did not yet have. But after 60, something very real changes. Your nervous system is different. Your tolerance for emotional chaos is lower. Your recovery time is slower, not just physically, but emotionally. Your emotional flexibility has slowly hardened into patterns, not because you are stubborn, because you are seasoned. Because your brain has learned what stability feels like, and it no longer tolerates disorder the way it once did. This is not weakness. This is biology. This is lived experience. Your body now protects peace the way it once chased opportunity. At this stage of life, emotional turbulence does not feel like growth. It feels like interference. And the problem begins when a man tries to insert emotional unpredictability into a life that now requires emotional simplicity. A life that runs on routine, on rhythm, on personal structure, on quiet discipline. You are no longer built to constantly recalibrate your emotional center around another person's moods, expectations, and emotional uncertainty. Stoics would say, do not add what threatens your tranquility unless it clearly strengthens your virtue. And that line is not romantic. It is practical. Because after 60, every emotional disturbance stays longer in the system. Every unresolved tension weighs heavier on the mind. Every disruption touches your health, your focus, and your inner stability. So the real question is no longer, does this relationship excite me? The real question becomes, does this relationship preserve the calm that my entire life has taught me to value? The hidden reason many older men seek girlfriends. Here is the truth few men will admit out loud. Most men after 60 do not seek love. They seek emotional reassurance. They seek validation that they are still relevant. They seek comfort against aging. They seek proof that they are not invisible. This is not romantic motivation. It is existential anxiety, and existential anxiety is a terrible foundation for relationships, because when a relationship becomes a shield against fear, it becomes a dependency. Dependency does not disappear with age. Men assume emotional dependency is a young man's problem. It is not. It simply changes its disguise. At 25, dependency looks like obsession. At 40, it looks like emotional negotiation. At 60, it looks like fear of silence. A man who has not mastered emotional solitude will always be vulnerable to emotional bargaining. And when you become emotionally vulnerable at an older age, the cost of instability is higher. Your body is less resilient. Your routines are more fragile. Your mental peace is more valuable. You do not have decades to rebuild. The illusion of companionship solving loneliness. Loneliness is not cured by proximity. Loneliness is cured by inner alignment. Two people can sit in the same room and still feel emotionally isolated. Stoicism never treats other people as emotional medicine. It treats inner order as the source of stability. When you make another human being responsible for regulating your emotional state, you create a silent contract. You must behave in a way that keeps me calm, and no one can fulfill that contract forever. The story of the man at 77. Let me return to the man who said that sentence. He married late, not because he never had opportunities, but because after retirement his days became quieter, and silence felt uncomfortable. At first, the relationship was beautiful. He felt alive again. He felt seen again. He felt emotionally activated. But slowly, something else happened. His routines bent. His personal rhythm adjusted. His emotional center shifted outward. He stopped being anchored to his internal structure. He began managing emotional weather that was no longer necessary. He told me, I realized too late that I traded peace for emotional stimulation. And emotional stimulation is not emotional fulfillment. The Stoic mistake men make about happiness. Most men confuse happiness with emotional intensity. But Stoicism defines happiness as inner stability. Peace is not excitement. Peace is not romance. Peace is the absence of internal friction. When you build a late-life relationship around emotional highs and emotional closeness, you introduce emotional volatility into a phase of life where stability should be sacred. Why emotional turbulence hits harder after 60. Your brain is less tolerant of prolonged stress. Your sleep is more fragile. Your emotional recovery time is slower. Your physiological stress response is stronger. A young man can argue, detach, and emotionally reset. An older man carries emotional disturbances deeper into his nervous system, and the body keeps score. The quiet power of emotional self-sufficiency. The man who learned this at 77 did not become bitter. He became free. He stopped chasing emotional reassurance. He invested in personal projects, physical movement, mental clarity, contribution, solitude without isolation. He rebuilt emotional independence. And what surprised him most was how calm his inner world became, not empty. Here is the real lesson behind the title. The title is provocative. Never get a girlfriend after 60. But the real lesson is this: never outsource your emotional stability after 60. If companionship naturally fits into a structured, emotionally self-regulated life, I'm fine. But if companionship becomes emotional oxygen, that is danger. Why modern dating culture is especially harmful for older men. Modern relationships operate on emotional negotiation, unspoken expectations, and constant emotional validation. That environment requires emotional flexibility and psychological resilience. You are not weak for not wanting that. You are wise for protecting your nervous system. Stoicism teaches, choose relationships that strengthen your character, not consume your attention. The biggest psychological trap of late-life romance. The biggest trap is emotional regression. A man who has spent decades building discipline, emotional maturity, and self-respect can unconsciously return to emotional insecurity when romantic uncertainty appears again. You start checking messages. You start interpreting tone. You start seeking reassurance. You start emotionally monitoring another person's availability. That is not growth. That is reversal. Aging demands emotional minimalism. At this stage of life, your energy is limited. Your attention is valuable. Your emotional bandwidth is finite. Stoicism would say, remove what complicates your mind. Not because life should be empty, but because life should be clear. Love should not become your emotional project. At 60, 70, and beyond, your emotional project should be you, your body, your mind, your discipline, your contribution, your unfinished internal work. Romantic pursuit should never become the center of your psychological effort. The dangerous comfort of being needed. Another hidden reason older men seek relationships is subtle. They want to feel needed. But being needed is not the same as being fulfilled. Being needed creates emotional obligation. Fulfillment creates inner contentment, and obligation quietly drains autonomy. The Stoic question you must ask yourself. Before you seek or accept a relationship later in life, ask one honest question. Does this add calm or complexity? Not passion, not excitement, not validation. Because calm is the foundation of longevity. Emotional solitude is not emotional isolation. Many men fear solitude because they confuse it with abandonment. But emotional solitude is strength. It means you enjoy your own mental company. You do not require constant emotional reflection. You do not need someone to witness your existence. You already do. Why men who master solitude become emotionally unshakable. When you stop using others as emotional anchors, you stop being emotionally movable. You become internally referenced. And that is the deepest form of confidence, not social confidence. Existential confidence. The modern fantasy of growing old together. It is beautiful when it happens naturally, but dangerous when pursued as a solution. When companionship becomes a goal rather than a byproduct of an aligned life. You chase an image, not a reality. The quiet superiority of emotional sovereignty. The strongest men I have ever observed in later life share one trait. They are emotionally sovereign. They do not outsource meaning. They do not outsource peace. They do not outsource self-worth. They welcome people, but they do not need people. What most younger men must understand now, if you are watching this at 20, 30, or 40, this message is not telling you to avoid relationships. It is teaching you how to prepare for emotional freedom later. Build emotional self-regulation now. Build purpose now. Build internal discipline now, so that when your external world becomes smaller, your internal world remains vast. Why this lesson matters more than ever. The world is becoming louder, faster, emotionally noisier. Your future self will crave simplicity. Your future self will crave quiet. Your future self will crave emotional clarity. Do not build a future that depends on someone else's emotional availability. Build a future that depends on your internal structure. The most powerful realization the 77-year-old man shared. He said something else before he walked away. He said, "I finally understood that peace is not found in companionship. It is found in not running from yourself. That is stoicism. That is mastery. That is emotional adulthood. If you still choose love later in life, then choose it from abundance. Not fear, not emptiness, not boredom, not loneliness, not self-doubt. Choose it only when your life is already complete without it. Because only then, love becomes a compliment, not a crutch. You don't need a woman after 60 to save you. You need peace. And if you're still searching for someone to rescue you from your own loneliness, you've already lost the battle within. Here's the final truth most men never admit. Never get a girlfriend after 60. If what you are really seeking is emotional rescue. Because when a man looks for rescue, he doesn't look for love. He looks for anesthesia. He looks for distraction. He looks for someone to silence the noise he never had the courage to confront alone. And that kind of relationship is not built on strength. It's built on fear. But if what you offer is emotional stability, if what you protect is inner order, if what you value is tranquility more than validation, then companionship becomes a choice and not a dependency. When you have built a life of discipline, when your mornings are structured, when your mind is calm, when your finances are handled, when your health is respected, you don't invite chaos into your world just because you feel lonely at night. You understand something powerful. Love should add peace, not replace it. Many men in their 20s chase beauty. Many men in their 30s chase status. Many men in their 40s chase meaning. But a wise man after 60 chases alignment. He asks, does this woman respect my silence? Does she value my rhythm? Does she bring calm? Or does she bring drama disguised as excitement? Because at that stage of life, energy is sacred. You don't have time for emotional turbulence. You don't have time to teach maturity. You don't have time to fix someone else's chaos. If a woman enters your life, she must match your peace. Not because you are cold, but because you finally understand your worth. And here is the deeper truth. A man who cannot sit alone in silence without feeling restless is still a slave to external validation, but a man who enjoys his own company, who can drink his tea in the morning without checking his phone for attention, who can walk in the evening without needing someone to hold his hand to feel complete. That man is powerful. Companionship will never control him, because he is not escaping himself. He is already centered. And when you are centered, love becomes partnership, not survival. You don't cling. You don't beg. You don't overgive to be liked. You simply share your life with someone who respects it. And that is the real victory. Now let me ask you something honestly. Do you feel at peace when you are alone? Or do you feel the urge to escape yourself? Be honest. Because the way you experience silence tells you exactly how strong your emotional foundation really is. Silence exposes everything. It exposes insecurity. It exposes regret. It exposes unfinished inner work. But it also reveals strength, clarity, self-mastery. If this message helped you see something clearly today, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share this video with someone who needs emotional clarity more than emotional comfort. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.